What's up? It's time to finalize pre-draft ranks. I've arbitrarily decided. So that's this video. The draft is happening obviously on Thursday, Friday, Saturday. It's currently, depending on how you look at it, Tuesday or Wednesday. I think I'm done. I'm still researching. I'm going to hear a lot more about these players. And honestly, after the draft, we're going to construct a rookie board to figure out how these players interact with each other in actual rookie drafts. Like, do you take the quarterback or do you take a tight end? That kind of question. Running back over wide receiver. But pre-draft this year, I'm just giving myself a pass on deciding whether I have to take Najee Harris, a decent running back prospect, over Jamar Chase, an exceptionally good wide receiver prospect, because I don't want to. So, I just thought we'd do a quick little video on where I've ended up pre-draft. After the draft is really what matters, but we have to have opinions locked in my ranks sheet, I guess you'd call it, available on Patreon. Yeah. Subscribe to YouTube, that kind of thing. I've actually got notes, some thoughts I've noticed while looking over their profiles and taking in other information as well. Mostly just my thoughts, but there you go. That's not going to be this video. I don't want to read it all to you, to be honest. But maybe a few things I want to note, especially because I've got them ranked by position, and then I've got them in tiers, and maybe that will elicit some further comment. Well, we'll see, I guess. It's really off the cuff. My name's Peter Howard, and I have a fantasy football problem, I guess. But let's go. And we're going to start with, quarterback. So, these are my pre-draft ranks for quarterback. I don't have a lot that I rely on at quarterback. I look at completion percentage, I look at youth, I look at how much they rush in college. Although even that's becoming a bit of a question, because the rushing quarterback of the moment is Josh Allen, and he didn't really rush much. So I'm looking for accuracy. I'm looking for accuracy above expectation. But really, I take on a lot of third-hand, I guess you would say, opinions about quarterbacks, and then I play the market, is the way I'm going to say it, because it sounds fancy. And really, that means, in this case of this season, like, Justin Fields was very clearly the quarterback 2 after the college season and after their careers, and they declared for the NFL draft. And since then, everyone and their mother has decided that there's reason to change, even though no more players taking place, their opinions. And that just seems weird to me, and so that's, I guess, my strongest take here. Trevor Lawrence, honestly, based on the information I've taken in, where he was playing, how accurate he was, his experience, his youth, and his rushing somewhat floor, for the position, he's kind of in a tier of his own, but I put Justin Fields in that tier too, just kind of underline the point, because just 1, 2, oh, look at that, can't count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 really doesn't describe that well. But yeah, Lawrence and Fields are just locked in on a tier for me. Honestly, they just look like better prospects overall, but I'm taking a lot of secondhand information here, so I don't have a lot of takes. Zach Wilson and Mac Jones are the two names most put above Justin Fields. I thought Mac Jones was a really interesting deeper prospect, because he was highly accurate in 1 year, his last year, at a slightly lower conference. Is a bit of a stretch, but there you go. And I like him, but since then, he's being talked as better because he might be taken earlier in the draft. And while we love draft capital, not so sure on the idea that the rumors of who's going to be taken, like, that doesn't make them a better fantasy player. I think there's significant signs that Mac Jones could be good in the NFL based on the few signs that I know that exist at all. But that doesn't mean he's better than the ones that have all of those signs. Also, he has some significant off-field concerns, I guess. that's a problem for me. I mean, I don't know how that plays out, and he's not a monster or anything. He's just a kid, but I mean, the others don't. So that's a negative, not a positive. I don't care that he looks like every bro that ever broed without ever going to the gym. I don't think that matters. I actually think that might be underrated value, apart from the fact he's literally pushed up in value despite there being negatives. So yeah, I don't get it. I do think it was highly accurate in his last season, and we like that. But yeah, that's where it is. Beyond that, my discussion of quarterbacks is very much, I don't know. I want to see them get draft capital. I want to see them drafted in the first 10 to 12 picks, mostly in their database, probably pinned in the comments description. That's what it is below a YouTube video. You can see all the stats I collect, and I have no models for quarterbacks. I've never found anything particularly useful to use, but we do have hit rates specifically by pick and pick range instead of by round, which is something that actually works for quarterback pretty much and doesn't work for most other positions, except maybe tight end. But yeah, so being drafted very high in round one is actually particularly important to quarterback, and we're going to know that soon. Honestly, this feels like a draft where all 5 of the top prospects here could easily be drafted inside those top 12, and there is a definite thirst for quarterbacks in the NFL right now, given the recent success of the new wave of quarterbacks that have entered the league. So, yeah, they could all well fit that description, but we'll see what happens. Trey Lance is someone that I can't really have even my slim opinions on quarterback on, because he played at a lower level that I don't really track for college, because the stats aren't comparable. They're honestly not comparable to even the independent conference. And that's not to say that means no good players come from there. Plenty of good players have come from there. David Johnson is one outside of my range. So is Josh Robinson from last year. I believe there's a quarterback somewhere I could name as well. But, I mean, it does happen. And so that's not a knock for me. I love the lower drafted guys playing at worse conferences. Like, they've just been overlooked their whole life, and I get to have a whole, underdog narrative. Love it. So I'm not against Trey Lance. I just know the least about him. And since my main way of playing this class is to tilt over Justin Fields being the actual second best quarterback prospect in this class, I just stuck with the standard ranking, and since Mac Jones has been pushed so high up, I just put him in a similar tier. Now, Zach Wilson has actually got none of those red flags I talked about with Mac Jones, and he's coming from a conference where he's pretty well-respected conference where quarterbacks are drafted fairly often. So technically, I guess I could put him in a separate tier, but really honestly feel the same with all 3. If they all get decent draft capital, landing spot might determine the most from that, and also a continuing education of myself listening to film grinders talk about the nuances of the game. Some of these guys are more likely to rush, more likely to be pocket passers. It's harder to succeed for fantasy in the top 5 at least, or even the top 12 as purely as a pocket passer, but the ones that do are pretty special. So yeah, that's where I'm at. Kellen Mond is there just because 4-4 asked me to find a deeper quarterback name, and looking through it, he's coming out with experience and fairly decent accuracy from his conference with a history of rushing, but one, he's not really been touted a lot. A lot of his film review is actually negative. He's also coming at a slightly older age with that experience, and one of the signals of experience is getting it early. And so being the starter early and getting a lot of pass attempts under your belt is a pretty decent signal that quarterback may well be good. So I don't mind him as a deeper name to know in 2 QB leagues, but he's just kind of there because they asked me specifically to go look for some deep quarterback, as if that's a thing I know about. So not very strong quarterback opinions, and that might upset or disappoint. Like, come on, do the work, and I have. That's the thing. All I can do is be honest with you, and I cannot find anything that works at quarterback. Like, there are some prospects that stick out. Trevor Lawrence sticks out. Andrew Luck stuck out. Patrick Mahomes, despite the fact there's a narrative now that no one really knew, he stood out exceptionally in that class. I have no idea why anyone would look back and think, now that we know he's actually Patrick Mahomes, that actually we didn't. Like, at the time, I remember vividly us all going, well, that's a different kind of prospect. And so I don't know what that's about. But Justin Fields is fairly close to that. I'd say he's, again, the closest to it in this class, which is why I've got him up there with Lawrence. But outside of that, all I can do is be honest. And since I find nothing that gives me a significant edge, I'm reading the room just the same way you are. I do think I'm fairly good at playing the market and seeing narratives and noticing when we're leaning too heavily on narratives that don't work for reasons that are fuels based. And again, that's why I think Justin Fields is, like, despite all of this off-season conversation, is the quarterback too. Outside of that, yeah, I don't. I'm not going to tell you, oh, definitely no. I also don't know about cornerbacks, linebackers, and plenty of other really important NFL positions. So that's where I'm at. Hopefully that's okay with you. And if it's not, then I can't help you, man. Like, I'm not going to lie and tell you I know something I don't. So that's where I'm at. Yeah. Let's go on to a position that I might know something a little bit about, at least. I think we should just start with the unsexy positions. That's a good way to start a YouTube video, right? Talk about the ranks no one cares about. No one's going to be surprised by my quarterback or my tight end ranks or my quarterback ranks. I've got a Kyle Pitts in a tier of his own as tight end 1. I do have Brevin Jordan above Pat Freiermuth, and I'm sorry, Pat. You don't want to see me try to say names that are even slightly complicated, honestly, because it doesn't go well and it actually works out worse, so it's better if I just mock it. Obviously, Pat's going to watch this video, so I thought I'd give him a shout out. There's no real conversation that needs to be had around Kyle Pitts. He was phenomenally productive for a tight end. He is definitely built more like a receiving tight end, and people are wild for receiving tight ends in this class. Brevin Jordan is the first player I have ranked in my second tier. I like him second in this class, pre-draft at least, but significantly different than Pitts. He was a larger part of his receiving offense in college. It was just a smaller receiving offense. I like that signal. He is also sized at a range where he would have to be more of a receiving tight end, despite the narrative I've read mostly been about him being more of a blocker. I mean, maybe they're all amazing players, obviously, to get this far, so maybe, but typically when we're thinking about a traditional dominant tight end, Travis Kelce, Rob Gronkowski, they're all over 250 pounds, like, easily, and 6'4" easily, and both Pitts and Jordan kind of fall short of the mark in both of those. So the players I have in mind, the roles that I see for them in the NFL, that I see, as if that matters, is Jordan Reed. It's a Jordan Reed, it's an Evan Ingram, and that's great. And if they're very good, and I think they could be very good, especially Kyle Pitts, yes, then that's great. Just know what you're betting on there, you know. Pat Freiermuth is the first one in this class I have ranked, again, just in tier 2 with Brevin Jordan. I like all these guys, Jordan, Freiermuth, and your boy, kind of all the same, but Freiermuth is actually the one that fits the description of an NFL-sized tight end, and he had a decent receiving skill set in college. His last year in college had a great yards per team pass attempt, which, yeah, is a signal, especially when you look at it across conference and team adjustments, and then compare it to age prospects. Yeah, he looks like he was actually a pretty decent receiver in college, although not as voluminous in terms of team role as Pitts and Brevin. And again, whether this is apparently a receiving tight end class, that's why I kind of give Brevin the nod there. We'll see what happens in the draft, obviously. But Pat is the first one definitely kind of built like we typically search for en route if there weren't, 700-yard producers in this class, I guess. So yeah, that's a slight difference from me to ADP, but honestly, it's not a big one. Like, I have them in the same tier. And if you want to go Pat over Brevin, and Brevin works out, I'm not going to be like, I told you Brevin, because, yeah, I get it. Brevin's a little undersized. I mean, he's a huge human being, don't get me wrong, but especially as athletic testing was a little underwhelming. I really thought he would test a little bit better than that, coupled with slightly, just a scooch, undersized. That, yeah, like Pat, that's fine. Your boy, or Kenny Yeboah, or Kenny your boy, I honestly don't know what it's called. I can't remember what size he is. That's bad to say. But I really liked receiving production in college. I went and looked him up. I've made some notes over here. for the Patreons, as they say. Let me just check that. I can't remember if he's in the Pat category. I was surprised because I really hadn't heard of him much at all. And then checking out rankings and just other people's work, a lot of people were really happy. And I thought it was just, that's a really fun name, right? Your boy. But actually looking into him a little bit, he was actually really good in college. Yeah, exceptional. He's the only one who's phenomenally above average across all three measures, team, conference, and hits. And yeah, I was kind of really taken with him, and so I stuffed him in that second tier, where again, if you take him over Faramuth, or you choose to wait to get your boy, depending on how ADP works out, or Brevin Jordan, I'd be like, yeah, that's pre-draft, that's where I'm at on them. What was his size? I honestly can't remember. I think he's in the Pat category, someone who's more traditionally built for the tight end, but I could be wrong. 30 BMI, yeah, 250 pounds, and what is that, 6'4"? So like Pat, he is someone who's actually crosses the threshold. Now again, like 250 and 6'4" is kind of the threshold, and he's right on it. But still, at least he's not right under it like Jordan and Pitts, and so he could fulfill more of that traditional Travis Kelce type role. Again, if his receiving production actually comes through. Let me see. Not a lot of touchdowns. I keep saying let me see, but I don't know how else to vamp. I'm not a good vamper. I think it's just time to admit that. 0.8 yards per team pass attempt, above the average of hits in the NFL. And the hits threshold there is having at least one top 12 season. So that's actually pretty impressive. I was trying to remember if he was the one who skipped around a little bit. I think he was. Let me read my notes here. Sorry, live reading my own notes, but, 'tis what it is. Yeah, he's someone who took an untraditional path towards being a prospect in this class, which is actually, for me, kind of a positive. He played 3 years basically at a lower conference, doing basically nothing. He did very, very little for those first 3 years. But then he elevated into an actual significant conference. I think it was the SEC West. Which again, the NFL just loves the SEC West. It's pretty much the highest drafted conference for every position since 2000 at least. And so they're definitely, I would imagine, aware of him, especially since he crosses those thresholds and he tested as pretty athletic at that size as well. He is coming out as a senior, but we get too stuck in our heads thinking of wide receivers, I think, when we look at tight ends. And so the fact he's taken this 4-year path, did nothing, and then had this one exceptional year, for Mississippi in the SEC South, the fact he doesn't have a typical, in my head, in some way, rests as a positive, because Jimmy Graham, Rob Gronkowski, a lot of the great tight ends don't have this traditional. Antonio Gates was a basketball player. Did you know that? Yeah, everyone knows. And that's kind of the story of the tight end position. George Kittle coming in from a lower conference, getting almost no draft capital, and being George Kittle because he's phenomenal as a receiver, but also phenomenally built over those thresholds, incredibly athletic. That's not actually a positive. It's not a data process analytics. It's just honestly something that I don't mind dismissing. The fact that he doesn't have 3 years of dominance like Brevin Jordan, or the heights of dominance in terms of overall production like Kyle Pitts. He does have this 1 year, an untraditional path, and I get to wave away the untraditional path because it's tight end, and that's actually fairly typical. Just focus in on that 1 year. And that was an exceptional year. Easily the heights of these other players. And notice I didn't separate out Kyle Pitts there. I mean, I don't think Mississippi, okay, it's not Florida, the SEC East, I guess, for tight ends. But I actually think their overall stats compare fairly well. Last year, I think your boy was actually, Yeboah, apologies, was actually, he had 15% of the team's receiving yards. Pitts' height was 17, to be fair. I'm looking for raw stats, honestly. Yeah, your boy had 524 receiving yards, which is at least, he was productive as Brevin Jordan ever was. in terms of overall stats. A little less dominant for the position on his team, but so was Kyle Pitts compared to Brevin Jordan. And in terms of that special blend of role and efficiency, like his last year was something special. I will say that, and I'm not at all worried that he didn't do it for 3 years in a row. Yeah, he had like 16.5 points per game last year in the SEC West, which is significantly above the average for tight end ones in that conference. It's like 8 points above, that's where I've got Pitts in my head. Pitts' best season was 8 points above the average for his conference for a tight end one. Kenny's best season last year was 8.5 points per game above the average tight end one for his conference, and the SEC West is no slouch in terms of production for the position either. So yeah, I'm slotting them in here to tier 2. I'm actually pretty interested in seeing if anyone in the NFL notices him, I guess, and where he goes. Hunter Long is someone that Zach Reed from the Dynasty Dummies pointed out to me, but he's since turned up in ADP as well. I got him in a slightly separate tier because I'm not as impressed. He actually, I think he's one of the undersized guys as well. No, he's actually over the thresholds as well. Okay, so there are a few guys, for some reason not the favorite guys, that actually are built like prototypical tight ends with decent athletic testing. Who's above average in yards per team pass attempt compared to his conference and team. Not as much as your boy, and so I dropped him a little bit because there's a little bit less of draft capital buzz around it. But Hunter Long's really interesting. Jake Ferguson, again, is just someone I found the name in ADP, and he did pretty interesting. Actually, Jake Ferguson actually compares fairly well to Hawkinson, who was more productive than Fant. And they're two productive athletic tight ends in the NFL currently, and so I thought that showed up as fairly interesting. Tony Tremble, I got asked to look at, and yeah, my only note on him is I don't get it. It must be something that's coming through on tape, because in college, in terms of he didn't do anything. And he might be good because he's getting a lot of buzz, presumably from people that are watching the tape, specifically the people that asked me to go look, but his best year is like 5% of the team's receptions, 7% of the team's receiving. Like, what? I don't know what they thought I could do with that, but he basically didn't do anything in college despite playing 9 and 10 games. He's coming from Notre Dame, the ACC Atlantic's a fine conference, I guess. Not a lot of tight ends drafted from that conference since 2000, but he's a name that's been thrown out, so you should probably be aware of him, but I can't. He didn't do anything in college, okay? I can't do anything with that. I don't get it. Oh, you're back. Hey, look. These are my running back ranks, badly framed because you can't see who running back 1 is, although you probably won't be shocked. I've got Najee Harris and Travis Etienne in a tier to themselves. It just seems... Again, read my notes, watch my content. I've done videos on both of them, I'm pretty sure. And both have a decent receiving history. Najee Harris waited till fairly late in his college career compared to other running backs that succeed to actually do it. But when he did get his opportunity these last 2 years, he kind of balled out. Travis Etienne, and it's hard to put a single thing on Etienne to say why I slightly edge Harris over him right now. He's just got... something to his profile just sticks out to me as not quite as good. He's also coming out with slightly more experience than you would expect. He does have a decent receiving role skill set. He just didn't stand out as well as Harris in the role he was playing, basically, in the place he was playing at. I really don't want to have to rehash all this. I know my thoughts and not my notes. Look at that. Let me see if there's a single thing, but there really wasn't. Just looking through both of them, I found relatively little reason to move it, especially considering the conference they're drafting to. They're both the most productive, especially once you throw away age a little bit for Harris. And my model liked Etienne a little bit more, but when I broke into it, I saw more of a traditional all-down running back in Najee Harris. It's just things like the heights of Travis Etienne's yards per team attempt was 2.1. and the heights of Harris was better at 2.3. It's marginal, but especially since Harris is coming from Alabama and the SEC West, he just edges out Etney a little bit. But I do think they're equally good prospects in their own rights. But yeah, Etney Harris in a single tier. Javonte Williams, I mean, he's like one of 3 guys in this class actually coming out at 21 years old with a prototypical build, decent 3-down skill set, and everyone that I know and trust that watches the tape says, yeah, he's really good. In fact, some have him over Harris and Etney. I can't quite do that to him, but I do like him a lot, and I like him distinctly more than any other running back in this class. He's actually got first-round buzz around him right now, but I don't know how much I believe any running back in this class is going to get first-round buzz. Third tier, I've got Gainwell, Hubbard, and Michael Carter, just all locked together. They've all got problems on their profile. They're all... Well, 2 of them are a little undersized in Michael Carter and Gainwell, but I'm not so worried about that, especially in terms of Michael Carter, because he was sharing a backfield and he was playing very much a receiving role more than most running backs, but it's still, there's enough signal there to believe he has a 3-down skill set and a team might utilize him in that fashion. Kenny Gainwell probably has one of the better single seasons from this class, but it was 2 years ago now, and that's entirely not a problem. In the sense that I didn't get to see him play last year like it might be for wide receiver. It's just, that's the thing. He's coming in at a decent age, but he's only really played 1 season at the college level, and now he's about to approach the NFL. That's a little bit of a concern in some ways. I mean, you might say running back doesn't take a lot of learning, but I don't think 1 year is necessarily enough, especially when a lot of film notes indicate that he bounces outside a lot and he doesn't block much, if at all, and he is slightly undersized. And those are skills that you can develop and can get practice at. Gainwell wasn't even playing in college a lot, but in that 1 year, had a phenomenal production year, and so yeah, I like him pretty well, and I've got him at the top of the third tier right now, but I have some concerns. Chuba Hubbard has a really great season, followed by a really bad season. Everyone probably knows this story by now. I think he's getting a little underrated. He's more of a running back than a 3-down running back, like most of these other players up to in tier 1, 2, and 3. But I'm not overly concerned with that. He showed some ability to receive in college, and NFL teams probably could deploy him in a way that gets us something of that PPR floor. And again, where we're stretching in this class, looking back at that 1 season of Chuba Hubbard, he was pretty good. And so I'm actually pretty excited about him, especially where the NFL has a lack of options if they want to go get the silhouette of the guy they normally go and get. And Chuba Hubbard kind of fits that profile a little bit more than most, in my humble opinion. But, you know, my humble opinion means nothing, and we're going to see what the draft brings. But that's where my prospect evaluation came out on him. He's actually only I say only, but he's 6 foot tall and 210 pounds. So not quite as big as Etney and Harris, but most of this class kind of fluctuates between 200 and 210. And so Chuba Hubbard is actually on the end of that range there. So yeah, I like him a decent bit. And he enters, what running back rank is that? Running back 5, tier 3. Pretty happy with him. After that, I got a bunch of interesting prospects I'm really interested in. Let me see if I can separate this out. Yeah, these are the 2 running backs that I'm interested in the first round. That's what tier 1 means. Javonte Williams in his own separate tier now. That's a recent addition I just made, creating him as a separate tier. I'm interested in him in the first round, especially if the draft swings even marginally towards his favor and his landing spot's decent. Gainwell, Hubbard, and Michael Carter are really only players right now that I want to consider in my second round. Draft dependent and all that said, but I don't expect them to rise into the first round. I really don't expect first round capital there. After that, we've got prospects I'm just willing to throw darts on. End of the second, early in the third. That's Jamar Jefferson, who I think has fallen slightly for no particular reason. Just we've got hyped on some of the nuances of the Gainwell, Hubbard, and Michael Carters of the world, or even the Kalen Hill, who has a really interesting profile as well. And Jamar Jefferson's name's just dropped down for lack of highlights, I guess, but he's one of the few running backs in this class coming out at 21 years old, he's around that 210 mark as well, if memory serves. Yeah, he's actually pretty productive. Yeah, he's 206 pounds, 70 inches, so just slightly, 5'10", reasonably athletic. And his production was decent, and I just like that he's coming from the Pac-12. He took on the role as a lead running back fairly early in college as well, and is coming out fairly. He's a better silhouette shape of what we typically search for. He was just a little underproductive in that situation. He did about what a running back should do in that situation instead of being exceptional in that situation, like some of the players in the tier above. But I still like Jefferson quite a bit. Kalen Hill comes next. Trey Sermon comes next. Trey Sermon I have more concerns with because he's got a little bit more hype. Kalen Hill, I think, was probably just as good in college. He's coming from the SEC West, played 4 seasons. Quickly became the running back 2 in points per game. Yeah, I like Kalen Hill's profile a lot. Both of these guys, again, between 200 and 210, so they're not the big boys, as it were, but decent skill sets. I'm a little concerned that Trey Sermon, again, like I said with Jamal Jefferson, he did well in a decent situation, and he did well in 2 decent situations, and was elevated and immediately used as a running back 1 when he was elevated to a higher ranked team. But, like, he didn't excel over what good running backs do in that situation. He was just in a good situation and produced as a running back should in that good situation. But, I'm not going to argue with that. I think he's a decent prospect depending on where he lands. Ramondre Stevenson is probably the one I've got the wildest take, if there is a wild take here. He doesn't even have 700 rushing yards in college, but he elevated from outside the range of college that I actually see. I think he was in a JUCO, according to Travis May, only took over the role full-time, like it was his turn at the wheel, as it were, which is very much a thing at running back, and doesn't necessarily mean you have to ding him for not being able to earn it like we will with wide receiver. But Ramondre Stevenson elevated from a JUCO college, only got his shot in 2020, which kind of is a sucky year to get your shot, and that's why he has, I think, less than, the 1,000-yard seasons we like to see. And he's one of those few running backs who crosses that 220 threshold. Like, he's a bigger-bodied back, and the NFL doesn't have a lot of bigger-bodied backs to choose from with anyway decent college or conferences. The conferences they typically like to draft through, I think is the sentence I'm trying to say. Yeah, he's 6 foot tall, 231 pounds. All of these are big men, don't get me wrong. But Ramondre Stevenson is just built a little different. As far as the receiving work goes, and again, he elevated onto a new team and into a really high-ranked team as well. And did get the role. That actually is a little narrative plus for me. Like, I like the fact he was being able to elevate to another level already once, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be better. I just think of it as more of a positive than anything else. He did what he should do after elevating to a higher level. I don't think that's a bad thing to see. Let's see, 7.7 yards per touch is actually it's actually pretty phenomenal. But again, we're looking at a smaller sample size here, so it's hard to believe in. I was just looking for his receiving work because I forgot. Yeah, I mean, again, he didn't really play ever full season in college, but 79% of his yards come from the rushing yard for a bigger-bodied running back. That's actually pretty low. I think he might have some receiving chops, or anyone watching him might see that he could catch the ball and therefore try to utilize him that way in college as a bigger-bodied running back. That's actually kind of interesting to me for obvious reasons. So, yeah, I'm putting him in this team 4, and he's at the bottom of it, but I'm really interested to see what happens to him in the draft. I have a lot of running backs and wide receivers ranked here. After this becomes, I guess, if I'm looking at running backs that land in interesting spots, like Mitchell, Spencer Brown, Jarrett Patterson, these aren't guys I'm really considering drafting in my rookie drafts yet, but we'll see what happens in the draft, and they all have, pluses and minuses on their profile, and you could see my ranks and my tiers, and I don't really feel like going through all of them. There are literal notes there, Let's do wide receiver. If I can find them. All right, so the big reveal, I guess. I've got Jamar Chase as a first-tier prospect. Isn't that what... Jamar Chase is... Where do we start? Let's start with BMI, because everyone loves BMI except me. There's 2 wide receivers in this class. Well, there's actually 3. But the 3 wide receivers in the class that come to mind that have BMI over 27, which is the average of top 12 producers. Therefore, it's a thing. It's not a thing. But Jamar Chase crosses that threshold. So even those ancillary boxes, Jamar Chase is just ticking off. He only played 2 years. First year, as typically happens, he didn't do much. He did enough. He was on the team. Second year, he was competing with Justin Jefferson for opportunity, which is teammate adjustments everyone wants to make, even though they make no difference and in no way add signal or make us more accurate on prospects. But what the hell? He was on a team with Justin Jefferson and was the one, like the wide receiver one. He's playing a typical X-alpha, big dog, high T, whatever you want to call it, role. And was amazingly productive at age 19 in that year with Justin Jefferson. I would have loved to see what he did in 2020, but we just have to accept that he had already done enough, especially coming from the conference and the team he's coming from, that I would be probably have him here no matter what he did in 2020 if he had chose to play out that season. So yeah, he's locked in. He's a player, and there are relatively few in this class that I would trade up to get, pre-draft at least. He's wide receiver 1 by a clear margin. I've got Bateman in my first tier as well, because, damn it, it's my ranks, okay? And I just love Rashad Bateman. Rashad Bateman. That's right, I said it like Bay. It's a joke we've got on Twitter. Either way, he played at Minnesota in the Big Ten East. No wide receiver from that conference has ever received more than a 5th round pick, and the last 5th round pick was like 4 years ago. So that's Rashad Bateman's problem. And then he played at Minnesota. And so you've got some scheme and competition questions you can throw at him. But look, he played where he played. And I was going to say he could not have done better, but he could have. He could have been Tyler Johnson. I actually think Tyler Johnson was more productive, but Bateman was more productive earlier. He actually has slightly higher production at age 18, and he was doing it with Tyler Johnson, who's already fully dominant, because weirdly, you can be dominant with another good player on your team. Like, happens every time when they're good, but still, anyway, moving on. I think Bateman's going to fall in the draft. I do. I hope not. For his sake, I guess. Draft capital's a good thing, more money and some such. But I think he will, and I won't like him any less. I didn't like Tyler Johnson any less. I just took the free value, and he got drafted behind like 2 top 12 wide receivers, and they threw Antonio Brown on top of it. So, yeah, hopefully Bateman doesn't get buried quite like that. I think we've got a little bit more hope that Bateman might get some draft capital. Like, I'm hoping for day 2. But hell, NFL's a crazy place. Maybe they started respecting ultra-dominant players from age 18 the first year they walk onto the field. Wouldn't that be something? Dominant class conference. There's nothing statistically that looks bad as far as I can see about Bateman, other than maybe he's a little too good. But that's not really a criticism. I need like drops or something because I need a break. Tier 2 at wide receiver. I really like all these players, and I want to put Taylor Wallace in there, but I don't know where Taylor Wallace is going to be drafted. These other 3, apart from Rondo Moore, who apparently NFL draft analysts can just forget exists. So maybe I'm wrong on this, but I think all 3 are more likely to at least be day 2 picks. Elijah Moore playing in the SEC West. Basically, he did what Bateman did, but in the SEC West. And he was playing on a team for at least 1 year with DK Metcalf and AJ Brown. He didn't break out that year. That's his age 18 season. He has like 9%, I think, of the team's receiving yards, if memory serves. Which, hey, look, team competition. But 9% is more than a lot of players did, including in this class, at getting teammate adjustments, by the way, at age 18. So, yeah, and following that, he did basically what Bateman did at a higher conference. He's short. It doesn't matter. Get over it. Elijah Moore is great. Devontae Smith, the most dominant point-scoring season from the SEC West in recent memory is Devontae Smith. I get it. He's slightly undersized. A recent interesting thing I noticed on that, by the way, Devontae Smith has a similar BMI to Robbie Anderson. I get that it's a concern for some people. I get it. They think he's going to blow away with the wind, or cornerbacks are going to be able to push him all over the field. But there's a whole bunch of ways of winning it in the NFL, and to be dominant these last 2 years, he's already had to overcome his size concerns, because most college prospects with first round or even day 2 buzz aren't his BMI. And so he's already kind of been filtered. His talent has already raised him above what players can typically do at his size at the college level. If the NFL believes to give him opportunity as well with a high draft pick, I'm going to go all in on that as well. I have him down here because, while I want to love him because he's anti-BMI Twitter, he's actually not as impressive as all those 3 wide receivers above him. He's in the same tier as Elijah Moore, but this isn't a so I don't care which one you take. I heavily favor Elijah Moore over Devontae Smith. Devontae Smith did have heavy competition in his team that didn't leave till those last 2 years. So if you like teammate score or teammate adjustments, it's already like, no, Devontae Smith is therefore better. Not to me. I think the fact he had 4 years in college and he couldn't even hit that 9% mark for Elijah Moore until that competition left, that's a concern for me. But these last 2 years, maybe he needed to learn a little more. Maybe he needed to develop a little more. He was trying to overcome his BMI, I guess. But I think the nuances to his game are there as well. If you care about those things, such things like routes and knowing what to do, and I guess whatever people watch on tape. Because most people that watch tape that I know and trust are like, yeah, he's got those things. And so I don't mind knowing that as well. Rondale Moore is in this tier. I don't know if I like him more or less than Devontae Smith. I really don't. I love how dominant he was at age 18. That's, to me, the most impressive season in this class. Rondale Moore's age 18 season. But he's a physical freak, which honestly makes me wonder, wasn't it easy to dominate at a younger age? Because one of the ideas of breakout age is you're less able to dominate physically, and he probably was. But yeah, he also played the slot. He's got like 10 yards per reception. That's a concern. But roles change, and slot guys get volume. And I care about 2 things really in fantasy football, and that's volume and points. So Rondale Moore, if he can co-opt good opportunity with decent draft capital and a good landing spot, I really think that first year that he did play significant time could indicate like significantly high upside. Same with all 3 of these guys. I don't care that one of them's short and one of them has a low BMI. I think these 3 guys have a high ceiling. At me, okay? Just at me. I believe they do. All right. Next in the class, our third tier. Again, these tiers, unlike with running back, and I was saying pretty much you can switch, these ranks are real. Like within the tier, like I put a lot of thought, or I end up going back and forth over a lot. I really like Taylor Wallace. Like, I really think he was good. He's played 4 years. He's coming from a slightly lower conference. And again, all those adjustment things that people want to make that don't actually help kind of push him down a little bit for some. But hey, if you like things that don't matter, he has a BMI of 27 or over, which again, he's one of 3 players in this class with that feature, so doesn't matter. But if you like things that don't matter, he's got it. Outside of that, he's really productive. Like above again, the red flag I can put on him is that he was maybe too productive, but not in the same way that JJ Arcega-Whiteside, who even at the time when I said I was interested in him in that season, I kept pointing out, but he was overly dependent on touchdowns. Taylor Wallace had a good touchdown share, but he wasn't dependent on it. His yards share kind of matches it. I'm really interested to see what happens in Taylor Wallace in this draft, and God help me if it's the Jets again, because he's got a strong Denzel Mims vibe at this point. And Seth Williams, I like more than I should, according to my model. But looking over his production, I don't get it. He had 3 dominant years. He was above average. And I think it's because the model's a linear regression model, and it wants to bigger numbers mean more. Overall, there's some slight complexity to it. He never quite got significantly above the average in most things, but I see dominance. In a bad team with reportedly bad quarterback situation, you see me just backpiling narratives that don't matter, but I want to like him more. So I stuffed him in the 3rd tier, and I think he's one to watch. Again, this tier we can call, I want to know where they get drafted, I guess. Dimey Brown, I like less than some people. Like, my favorite sleepers that are known in this class are actually Taylor Wallace and Seth Williams. Yeah. Dimey Brown is the one that gets mentioned more often, and it's actually higher in some ADPs and some rankings than I see as well, so I don't know really what people think of Taylor Wallace. I don't hear him talked about a lot, which also makes me like him a little bit. But maybe there's not enough buzz on tape. That could be a negative thing, but man, I like his profile. Dimey Brown has you could say at least his role is more valuable to the NFL. Fast guy who can play the outside specifically if they want to. That doesn't lead to a lot of fantasy success necessarily, but I mean, that might interest NFL teams a little bit more. Never hit a 30% dominator threshold though, which Wallace and Seth Williams did. Slightly lower situations though. So I like Dimey Brown a lot, but I strongly like Seth and Taylor more than him, but Dimey's really interesting. Jalen Waddle and Terrence Marshall make this tier because there's too much smoke. Jalen Waddle, I can see how in a small sample there's some interesting statistics there, specifically his yards per team pass attempt. Like he hit I think it was a 3 yards per team pass attempt, which is a pretty decent benchmark, especially in a smaller sample, because it's a unique blend of per game role and efficiency. So I can almost believe that one. But again, he just basically didn't play it in college, so I don't know. So I can't honestly rank him above these other players who did it. But I do believe the smoke around Jalen Waddle. He might be more of an NFL player, is the other thing that I've heard, like a dynamic playmaker. And again, that would back up, when you don't play much in college, you can't develop more of your game. That adds up. But I would believe it exists there with Jalen Waddle based on some of his small sample but decent stats. Terrence Marshall, I've argued about this too much, but even in his small samples, that 7-game stretch everyone wants to talk about, his stats are below average. The stats that I care to look at, he was below average. You don't get to be good just because the last 2 players from your team were good. I don't get it. Like Jalen Waddle, I can see decent stats in that smaller sample. I can't find it with Terrence Marshall, and I've argued about this too much. Even if I were to per game it, I'm not overly impressed. I shouldn't, because at this point I'm so frustrated with looking over this profile. I'm like, maybe it's just a jersey. Maybe it's betting on a prospect that just is coming from where Jamar Chase is coming from, and Justin Jefferson. And this team's clearly done a good job stacking its depth chart, and the NFL's going to draft him highly. Draft capital will move him up. If he gets first round draft capital, I will have to move him up. There is a lot of smoke here. I just can't find any of the reasons for it, and I've literally argued with... And that's the thing, I'm arguing with stat nerds about Marshall. Like Jalen Waddle, I get more film takes. Like on tape, in the small sample, when you don't have enough statistical sample to really, in my opinion, estimate how good they are, then it comes down to the other information I don't have access to, which is a tape. But no matter who I quiz about Marshall, outside of YouTube highlights, like actual grinders, they're like, he's alright. I don't have to argue with Marshall about people that actually watch. His skill set, what he did on the field in the small sample, has not stood out to them. This is nerds disagreeing on whether we can know more than we do about small samples. And they're all smarter than me, so you should probably listen, because he's going to get draft capital. That's where I'm leaving it. Alright, tier 4. I love Tutu Atwell. I do not care. He's tiny, man. He's 155 pounds. I'm putting him here because it's literally no risk. He can never do anything. He can get blown off the field in his first game because of a stiff gust of wind. This is players you're thinking about maybe drafting in the 3rd round in a rookie draft, so you should probably think about running backs or the waiver wire ads, okay? The player that I'd probably more likely to add from this tier is actually Jalen Darden. I just did a separate video on him, and it was a long one, so go watch that, I guess, for notes, but I think he might be more likely to have an immediate impact, or some level of impact in the NFL. God, I hope it's Tutu or Chatarius, which is his actual name, Atwell, but I'd be more likely to believe it's Jalen Darden. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Keelan Stokes, they feel like players who might be better NFL players. They have an interesting skill set. They might peak up. Their value might rise, and so I'm interested in them and where they get drafted. But no, like DJ Chark is the upside, okay? Tamarian Terry, physically interesting. Honestly, that's why he's there. His prediction was interesting at a slightly older age, and he's physically interesting. They can be upside there. I don't deny it. So yeah, there you go. Next tier, Nico Collins. Again, he's kind of a DJ Chark for me. I don't think he's ever gonna be it, but he has a really interesting skill set. Decent production in college. Less impressive than Amon-Ra and Keelan Stokes. So I have Nico Collins, who's fast becoming a favorite sleeper by many. I know, and I can see why. He was never above average, but he was also playing on a bad team, and you can make any pile your own narratives, but that's what I see. Isaiah McCoy, I just love as a defensive prospect. He's another one. This is a really tiny class overall, and a lot of wide receivers who were productive in college this year were just tiny, and it's hard to believe the NFL is going to give him opportunity. That's Tutu, that's Isaiah McCoy, but Isaiah McCoy's got an even stronger draft bias going towards him. NFL teams mostly don't roster players from his conference. Maybe. Kadarius Toney, he's down here because despite the smoke, I don't care. No. No, he played let's see, how did I say this? He played 4 years and finally hit the heights of a 22% of his team's receiving production in his final year. No. Again, there's smoke there, so he's probably an amazing playmaker. You can probably see it on tape. And I believe that's information I don't have access to. I just don't. That's never happened, and there's not a he's injured narrative that nerds are pushing him up into first round draft capital range. So yeah, Kadarius Toney just lives down here. I got a lot of other wide receivers ranked in different tiers. I'm not really interested in any of them. Swartz is fairly interesting because I've heard him push because of his age. I don't really buy it, but he's an interesting name. If I were to pick one out here, Amari Rodgers is interesting because he actually has a BMI over 30, which also has never happened in the top 12 or top 24 since 2000. Just throwing that out there. But he's a thick boy. He's really got an interesting BMI. His production's so. And according to Zachary from the Dynasty Dummies, he's basically got all the facade of a receiver, but when you dig into it, it's not a receiver. And the metaphor he used to describe that was like a burrito or an egg roll from a gas station. Like, it kind of looks like an egg roll or burrito, whatever he said, but when you bite into it, it ain't it. And that's kind of the feeling I got in his stat profile as well. But hey, he's got a BMI of 30, so that's lit, man. And those are my rankings that I cared to talk about. My pre-draft rankings are not going to change until after the draft. This is the RK rank receipts tab, so like I've got the date in here. And this isn't to prove how good I am. This is a function of how I try and get better. I like to look at past years, see what I got wrong pre-draft, see what I got wrong post-draft, and see if there are any common patterns to it. Instead of just trying to remember, like, how many players have played in the Canadian League and then were Chase Claypool, and instead I can literally have some sort of, look at that, record of it for myself. And I figured, patrons might be interested in some accountability of me as well, and so hence this tab was published and born. But yep, those are my wide receiver, running back, quarterback, and tight end ranks pre-draft in the 2021 season. Big screen? Yeah. That was not 20 minutes. That was not 20 minutes at all. If you have any questions about it, disagree with it, if I'm missing someone that's really important that should be in those early ranks, let me know. I probably disagree with you, but I want to know what you think. Like, that's the fun of this game. We get to disagree with each other a little bit. Never supplant my opinion or your opinion with mine. That would be my strongest piece of advice. Develop your own opinions. Take in other people's. That's what I've tried to do here. But it's really not as fun. I find it more fun to fail on my own opinion than succeed in someone else's. Your mileage might vary, but these ranks I'm not presenting them like, and you should have them ranked this way, but I will say it that way constantly from now until the season and in the season, because it's really no fun if you don't have someone to hate, and I find that fun. Providing an actual opinion, a strongly held opinion you can butt up against and disagree with. I'm happy to be that too. I just, honestly, me to you, like, if you disagree with me, go with what you think. You should always, because it's much more fun. But you can fight with me about it, and I won't back down. These are my strongly held beliefs and opinions. And yeah, let's talk about it as much as you want. Draft soon. Can't wait for it. I'm on a few different live streams. DLF is hosting a live stream. RotoWorld is hosting a live stream. I am on both nights. Unfortunately, at work, the Dynasty Dummies podcast decided not to go through. Also, the Undroppables are doing a live stream. I'll be on that on day one as well. So you'll hopefully be able to find me everywhere. Watch my Twitter feed, I guess, and Patreon, where I'll be posting my appearances as and when they come up. And let's enjoy some draft together. That sounded like a weird way of saying that. Anyway, I'm gone. Let me know what you think. Let me know what your ranks are. I'd be really interested to hear it. Thanks very much, and talk to you next time. Bye.